is really the key question, the key political question facing European security at the moment, the transatlantic relationship, which is how strong is the resolve of the Western alliance going to be in the months and possibly years to come in the face of Russia's aggression. And to discuss this issue with me, I'm very happy to introduce a quite distinguished panel, beginning with the German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock, the Europe Minister of our host country, Poland, Konrad Szymański, the Foreign Minister of Czechia, Jan Lipavsky, and finally, the Foreign Minister of Croatia, Gordan, Grlić, Radman. And Minister Baerbock, I would like to start with you, if I may. You've spent the last 24 hours in Poland, and here, as you've done since the beginning of the war, really, you've spoken very convincingly and very eloquently about the necessity of helping Ukraine defend itself against Russia. You said yesterday on the occasion of Germany's National Day, to mark the reunification, Eastern Europe's security is Germany's security. You can count on that. And yet there are, I think, not just in Eastern Europe, but in other corners of Europe, of the EU, there's concern about Germany's resistance, particularly in the public. And there were large demonstrations just yesterday, in fact, in parts of Germany, particularly in the east. I think there were 10,000 people in the town of Gera alone protesting the support for Ukraine, people waving Russian flags and so forth, and demanding an end of the sanctions. Why do you think there is still such a disconnect in your country when it comes to supporting Ukraine as compared to, let's say, Poland or other countries in the region?
Well, good afternoon from my side, and thanks for having this conference. I think this is just the right moment, because we are facing a winter where it is crystal clear that Russia is using another element to its hybrid warfare, and this is dividing societies and dividing Europe. And that's why it's so important that we make crystal clear today and also in the upcoming days that we stand united with 450 million Europeans who support Ukraine, with 80 million Germans who support Ukraine, with 40 million Poles who support Ukraine. And I think that we have to be very, very careful that we don't fall in the Russian trap of highlighting demonstrations or highlighting fake news as the majority thinking in society. We have seen this also in the last years with regard to the refugee situation. We have seen it over Corona, that there is a tendency that the loudest people pretend to be the majority of a society, but this is not the case. Those people who support Ukrainians in all our countries, and I mean here in Poland, people are still hosting Ukrainian refugees in their own apartments, in their own flats, in the room of your own child. In Germany, we have given a refugee to almost 1 million Ukrainians, and this is the majority of our societies. And we shouldn't follow Russia's narrative that this is different. So I would like to underline, yes, there are also demonstrations in Germany, as there are in other countries, but again, on these demonstrations, there are also people saying, don't support Ukraine. I've been at my own election campaign event where people are screaming at me, why are you supporting Ukraine? But there are other people on the streets arguing about the energy prices. And this is my second point. We have to make sure that we are not being divided. We have to ensure that especially those people who do not have a lot of money, that they are being supported over the winter time. I have learned that Latvia, for example, is giving direct support for the poorest in the country with regard to the electricity bills. We are doing it by cutting the electricity prices. And again, the main task is to stand united also on the energy and on the social matter. And my third point is, yes, we have been maybe a bit late in the beginning of the war, but we have changed our course in Germany with regards to weapons delivery by 180 degrees. We are supporting Ukraine with the most sophisticated systems like the IRIS-T system, together with our partners. And I'm really happy that we discussed today with the Polish foreign minister a military hub for maintenance of this weapons delivery, because we have to make sure that this military support will also last over winter, also last within the next years if Ukraine still needs our support, and we will be there united as long as Ukraine needs us.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Thank you very much for that extensive answer. But the crux, I think, for a lot of people when it comes to weapons, in terms of Germany, is the continued resistance to send certain heavy weapons, as you know, in particular battle tanks. You have sort of signaled that you would support that. Other people in your coalition do not. Do you think that you are going to be able to convince the rest of Europe that Germany will do whatever it takes to help Ukraine until you do send tanks, which looks at the moment as if that's not really in the cards?
Well, again, we are reflecting every day together with our partners what we can do more. You were mentioning also with regard to the tanks, especially Leo, but we are delivering already tanks right now. We are delivering the Gepard tank, which makes a difference in the battlefield. And because it makes a difference in the battlefield, which we can see as also other systems are doing, like the Mars system, we are looking at all our stocks, what we can do more. So we are now delivering also more howitzers 2000s together with the Netherlands, because we can see that these weapons do not only free territory, but it saves people's life. And with regard to further tanks and the debate you're mentioning we did together with other countries the backfilling approach. So there are tanks coming now via other countries also to Ukraine. And yes, I have underlined, as my Chancellor has done, we are also reflecting with further tanks support. But as we have done it with regard to the howitzers, with regard to the Gepards and other support, we are doing all these steps together with our international partners, because it's the most efficient way.
Just one quick last question on that. Do you think Olaf Scholz will give up his resistance to sending Leopard tanks to Ukraine?
The Chancellor has made clear that he is reflecting with our international partners what more we can do, and take the steps as we have done also in the past together with our international partners. And this is not an excuse. The beginning of your first question, this really hurts me, especially as a politician which has been in opposition before. So I know and I totally understand the reluctance towards my own country because of the Nord Stream 2, because we didn't listen carefully enough, we as a German country, towards the right arguments of saying, well, Nord Stream 2 will be used as a weapon within the next situation. And this is why, for me, I can totally understand that there are so many questions, especially in the Eastern countries. So do you mean it this time? And I can only say, please trust us. Yes, we mean it. This time, we will defend every corner of our NATO territory. We will support Ukraine as long as they need us, but we will do it together with our international partners, because it doesn't help if we are delivering tanks and then we don't have any munitions that the tanks will work. So we have to do it coordinated and I believe we did this in the last months, as we have done it in the last months, and this was also part that Ukraine could fight back in the eastern territories.
Thank you. Minister Szymański, I'd like to come to you from a Polish perspective, responding to Minister Baerbock. Do you trust Germany? Do you take Germany at its word?
I can fully agree with Minister Baerbock.
Nobody's listening, just be open.
I fully agree with Minister Baerbock that even a loud and vocal minority isn't representative for the country. So we shouldn't reduce the politics of Federal Republic to any sort of social interactions. Let's concentrate on practice. And to put it in the context, I would like to say that the practice, this wider context, is unexpectedly positive. We have to be proud about all we did as a union, as also partners in the union since the beginning of the war, because we started building the enormous, unprecedented sanction architecture since the day one after the war. I think it was absolutely unexpected by Putin. It hasn't been expected even by some EU member states, including me, to be honest. I'm positively surprised that we can be such effective body in that terms. We activated a lot of money for military assistance at the EU level. We did a lot in terms of humanitarian response to the situation. So the general context should be positive, because it is something. We did a change. But in the same time, having in mind that this glass is maybe even more than half full, we should also concentrate on the other part of the glass. And of course, the reality is that the macro-financial assistance agreed by the leaders in June is still not delivered. The reality is also that the military assistance, so urgent, so dramatic, is still inadequate in some member states. Of course, I expect a lot from Zeitenwende, and I think with new minister in German MFA, my high hopes are quite realistic. But this reluctance Minister Baerbock mentioned was pretty risky for the Ukrainian state. This reluctance, I can understand the reasons behind the historical social motivations, but this reluctance of some member states has been a risky for European security. And I think this is why we need honest exchange to define properly where we are and what we need urgently, which is macro-financial support, military assistance, massive, not inadequate, and of course much more active stance on sanctions, because there is no single argument to make any other choice. We would be very happy to see that the war can be finished tomorrow, but there is no chance for this, so we have to be firm and we have to be more substantial, especially in the field of macro-financial support and military support. The delay we observed was pretty risky, not only for Ukraine, but also for European security. And that's why we've been so bitter in some comments about the inadequacy of military assistance provided by some member states, especially with the biggest capacities.
Minister Lipavsky, in your country, you've also seen some of the same currents that we've seen in Germany, in terms of pockets of resistance, let's say, or people who might be more sympathetic with the other side, as it were. But do you think that is a cause for concern as we head into winter here, as people really start to feel the financial pain of inflation, of the economic downturn, of the recession that many economists are anticipating? How do you see this playing out not just in your country, but in the region in terms of European leaders' ability to keep this solidarity that we've seen so far with Ukraine?
Your question is part of something bigger. It's part of the sustainability of our efforts, and that something which is called war fatigue won't be overcome with good policies. And as a Western civilization society, we can be speaking about the EU, NATO, but also about allies like Japan, Australia. We have made certain commitments, G7 countries, to support Ukraine for the very principle that the borders won't be changed by force and that Putin won't achieve what he has in his imperialistic/colonial plans. And now we are in a situation when we need to overcome winter, when certain parts of our populations are affected by his economical war against the EU, especially since he manipulated the energy market. So I see the answer on your question just as a part of the whole struggle to keep the West united in this effort. And yes, now we need to do proper economic packages, social packages, and measures in sense of energies. This is a very hard situation, and the EU is doing something, and national governments are quite active in it too. So, for example, the Czech government, we have a solid package in a way. I'm sure that other governments too. And we need to keep European solidarity since there might be countries which we need for united stand on sanctions, for example, in the EU, and they will struggle with coping with the situation since they may have I won't be naming, but we can read this political situation in different countries. So this is something which should also be on our radar.
Mr. Radman, you have an interesting perspective because you come from a corner of Europe that has traditionally been quite exposed also to Russian propaganda. Your neighboring region of Bosnia-Herzegovina is also facing a continuous onslaught of Russian propaganda. How dangerous do you think the situation is in the Western Balkans in terms of Russia trying to influence the political systems there, and what do you think that will do to the continued solidarity that we've seen throughout many of the countries in the region, not all of them, obviously, not to mention any names?
Yeah, thank you very much, Anna, for your question. Sometimes I have a feeling that so we are privileged being there in this corner. You mentioned, of course, that we see that Croatia has this opportunity to also to warn and to show how is interested in the stability of Western Balkans. It's our immediate neighborhood. You mentioned also Bosnia and Herzegovina, but complexity of Bosnia and Herzegovina says that Bosnia and Herzegovina is multinational country, and probably one part of Bosnia and Herzegovina had a different approach. Yes, it's not only the Bosnia and Herzegovina, but the other countries in the Western Balkans who have this aspiration to be a member of European Union. So there are some countries who are already members of NATO, and Croatia is vocal proponent of the European perspective of the Western Balkans. Once, so 30 years ago, we lived in one country, and actually we know the mentality, we know the situation there. Slovenia and Croatia fulfill all the foreign policy goals, and what remains the stability and institutional functionality of Western Balkans. But first of all, there are European values, the rule of law, the human rights and democratization of society, it's very, very important. And it's up to the countries to fill all the criteria. And of course, when it comes to Russian aggression on Ukraine, Croatia was among the first country who just realized and to show the solidarity. Our prime minister visited many times Ukraine as well. And we knew that something could happen because we had the same 32 years ago, the situation when from Yugoslavia broke down. And so we want our allies and our partners, however, and we'd like also to help with our assistance and our experience also here, also in Ukraine, however. But our message to Brussels is, and to our neighbors, please, if you just would like to be on the right track of history, you have to show with your concrete activities. Namely, there's not possibility in this very important, dangerous and challenging time to have on a two-seat chairs. So whether you're a pro-European or we are democratic states, or you are not pro-European, that means you are on the side of the autocracy and so on. And it is the message. If the countries from Western Balkans aspire to be a member of the European Union, first they have to follow the common foreign and security policy. It's just a red line. Otherwise, so we cannot accept actually the further negotiation or further actually, in fact, the countries should decide on whether are they pro-European or not. Of course, it's not just so like that. We should just to encourage these countries, raise actually the international law, raise actually the peace, what is actually European policy, and just to encourage them and to choose the right side.
Thank you, sir. One of the lessons I think a lot of people have taken from the past year or so, Minister Baerbock, is that the role of the United States in Europe is, or continues to be, much more central, I think, than a lot of Europeans were willing to admit. If you look at the aid, we were just talking about the military aid, the United States has given more than 20 times as much as your country, for example. They just decided a few days ago to give an additional $12 billion in aid. What do you think this means for Europe's security going forward? How reliant do you think Europe should be on the United States for its security, not just in terms of the United States obviously being the pillar of NATO, but this runs much deeper, because whenever there's a crisis, we were just discussing the former Yugoslavia, the United States came in and led those efforts to create a kind of peace there. And here again in Ukraine, the United States is really bearing the brunt of the burden.
Well, first of all, I liked your picture about the glass which is half full. And I think it's hard to be in politics if you are not believing, or you're not willing to believe, that you can make a difference yourself to the positive side. At least this is a reason why I'm in politics. And that's why I think even in the hardest times we are facing the hardest economic crisis within my country since the end of the Second World War. We have an attack on our European peace order. But we shouldn't regret, I believe, that now the US and the EU are closer together than maybe ever before. But I think it's a positive sign that the transatlantic partnership, the transatlantic trust, the relationship between the EU and the US, the relationship between the EU and NATO is stronger than ever. And this is our strongest weapon also in fighting Russia. And this is why I think we shouldn't now look at it from the side, well, this is not a good sign. This is a very good sign. And it has changed also European policy. If you look at the NATO strategic concept, if you look at the new EU defense concept, you can see that the understanding how we see EU and NATO also as partners, also those members which are not even NATO member, is a step forwards also to a stronger European defense alliance. And therefore, I think it's a good sign. But on the other hand, this is also a wake-up call, and there I agree. It's also, or it has been a wake-up call for one of the biggest countries within the European Union, that we have to invest more in our own security. This is why we did not only change course with regard to weapons delivery, but this is why we are saying openly as a new government, we have to fulfill our NATO targets. And this is why we have to look how we can combine our defense capabilities. Because if we are frank, and again, I think this is not only a bad part that we as social welfare states invested in the past also a lot in social welfare states and not like Russia invested many things also in on a military capacity, but that we have to look closer at pooling and sharing. So now, while also Germany is investing way more in our own defense capabilities with regard to the 100 billion we just set up for our support, I think the next step also to be more capable of defending ourselves as Europeans without only relying on our US partner. We are looking, for example, now at the new facilities with regard to EU mission for Ukraine. We can use this instrument now together with the maintenance hub as a next step towards a common European defense union. So I think within all this crisis, we can look, and we have to look, and this is what I'm working on, how we can build the European Union defense and security capabilities even stronger out of this common situation, but not against the US, but together with our partners over the Atlantic.
Minister Szymański, there's been a lot of talk in Europe, even predating the Ukraine crisis, about what the French have called strategic autonomy. I think most people are familiar with that concept. That has died down a little bit now, but with the Germans spending 100 billion on their special fund and talking about taking a leadership role and so forth, and the Zeitenwende, this transformation that they've been advertising. Do you think Poland is and the region are going to start looking to Germany for leadership? Chancellor Scholz recently said that Germany needs to take a leadership role on matters military and foreign policy.
I think the war proves clearly that we as Europeans should do more on our security. Not to build an appropriate parallelism with the United States and the rest of our alliance, which is NATO, not to build absolutely artificial tensions across the Atlantic, but to contribute even more to collective security of the West. And here, of course, there were plenty of definitions of this autonomy, some of them quite toxic, some of them quite provocative, but in the end, I think we can meet with all EU member states, including France, that yes, we should do more on security. This is nothing controversial. But the reaction, our reaction, I mean, European reaction to war will define our reality, the real importance, the real gravity of Europe in international relations for decades, for generations. And if anybody would like to see Europe as a more powerful factor, then we should do more on our security. It should do more in military assistance to Ukraine, because this is number one. We should do more in our international role across the globe. And of course, the scale and gravity of the challenges we face needs a reconciliation, revitalization of the whole West. So we are pretty sure that nothing changed. America will play a significant, indispensable role in our security, and we can do more to be even more visible, to be a real factor, it depends on us. If we really want to prove that we are here, let's do more on military assistance, let's do more on reconstruction of Ukraine. Then the world will understand that, yes, Europe is a factor. And this is the way to be more visible, more important actor at the international state. Not declarations about the future of NATO, quite toxic declarations we heard a couple of months before the war. We need actions.
But I think some people would argue in order to be a factor and to remain a factor, Minister Lipavsky, you need leadership. And who would you say is now leading Europe on these questions?
That's a very good question. There's a formal and informal leadership. And yes, this is not aligned in this sense, since the formal leadership sits in Brussels, but we need the political leadership of those countries which really can change situation on the ground. And I would say that part of this political leadership now sits also here now in Warsaw, but generally in Eastern Europe, which was for a long time calling for measures against Russia influence. And now we see that those bad scenarios fulfilled. So I would say in certain manner that the Central and Eastern Europe has some kind of political leadership in this very specific agenda of the horrendous Putin war. But of course, there is a calling for some kind of visions. And what we have to understand is that we European ministers, we meet all the time. We meet every month at least once, maybe even more often. There is a very intensive exchange of ideas between the EU states. We have a NATO ministerial, so we meet quite often with Canada, with the USA, with the US. So the leadership, we don't need a leadership in a sense of the one leader who would be dictating what the policies are, but whoever comes with a good idea, then it's quite easily seeded into the other states and it can flourish. So, of course, for the big changes, you need a strong leader, but on the other side, we have these mechanisms of multilateralism here in Europe, which are working quite in a good way for us.
I agree. I don't think anybody has ever accused Europe of not having enough meetings, to be honest. But I would like to go to the audience for a couple of questions. We have a couple of minutes left. There's a microphone in the middle. If you have a question, speak now, or forever hold your peace. Here in the third row, please. Is there? I was told there was a microphone in the middle. Oh, here it is, by the spotlight right there. And if you could say your name and affiliation, please.
Hello, my name is Aleksander Sławiński from Gazeta Wyborcza newspaper. I have a question to Minister Baerbock, a question related with this criticism towards Germany. Because what do you think, to what extent this criticism from the international community, especially in Central Eastern Europe, but also different parts of the world, how does it actually impact the thinking of, let's say, average person of the society? Do people think that if they are criticized, they should change their mind about the Russia, or instead they think that if they are criticized, that they make their position more solid, and they think that if we are criticized, then we should keep with our perspective, because there's like this mechanism that when you're criticized, you start being contrarian, let's say. So that's my question about German society.
It's a very great question, and I think everybody who's been abroad if you're at home, the most critical person to your own society, but if you're abroad and people telling you, well, you in your country are like this and that, suddenly you turn to the most patriotic person on earth. At least this has happened to me when I was 16 years old, being at school in the US and being asked whether we have refrigerators in Europe. But on a serious note, because this is a serious question, as I said before, anyhow, for democracies, a critical public and critical friends are most importantly, because if you are just confirmed with your own position, nothing is going to move. So I think it has been very important also for political decision-making within Germany that even in those years where, as I said before, Germany did not listen carefully enough to the right assessment of many partners with regard to Russia, that our friends didn't stop in sticking the finger in the wound. But I would like to underline that now, while we have changed our course and we have made crystal clear, not only for the German government, but within all the papers, and I would just support, we are meeting often, but I think as productive as within the last half years, maybe we haven't been for a long time. We have defined a new Russia strategy also from the European Union with a big push and support also from Germany, and I think this is due to the critical tone which have come also to my country, and we have underlined that we will achieve security only from and not with Vladimir Putin's Russia those days. And this was an important shift in German policy. So coming back to the heart of your question, which is very difficult, I said, speak open and frankly, we are just between friends. The last podium we had together, I had a fake news shitstorm afterwards. So you have to choose every word you are saying. But I would like to say, if you change your course and then you're on the right track, then it's really hard to see the arguments when you haven't changed your course. And I think many people, and I see that in my own family, I see this with my own friends who are saying, yes, we have been wrong with Russia in the past, but now we are understanding what we have to do together. And we can only succeed together with our European friends. So this is what I would like to leave. Now at this moment where we stand united as never before, also because Germany is on board towards Russia, we have to stay united, and we shouldn't give every inch of possibility that at this moment the European societies can be divided from outside.
Thank you very much, Minister Baerbock. I see we're a few minutes over already. Some of the ministers have other appointments, so I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there today. No shitstorm, I'm afraid, but thank you very much to the ministers for joining us today. Thank you.